In the gospel text of today, which is taken from chapter 6, verses 52 to 59 of the Gospel of John, we continue hearing from the discourse on the bread of life. At the beginning of this text, the people are discussing about Jesus talking about giving themselves his flesh to eat. And they wonder how this is possible. Their question is, how can this man give us his flesh to eat? And Jesus realizes what they are discussing, and Jesus hears the question of their discussion and responds, and once again in his own imitable way takes them up to a higher level. And this level is where he invites them to the Eucharist that was celebrated when he fed the 5,000. The Eucharist in which he gave thanks to the Father, and which he gave the bread not through his disciples, but gave the bread himself to the people so that they could be satisfied. In that gesture of giving the bread himself to the people, Jesus was also symbolizing the giving of himself. So when he speaks about his own flesh and his own blood, what he talks about is that his giving of himself as a ransom for the salvation of the whole world. Jesus will hold nothing back. The flesh and the blood which Jesus speaks are metaphors for his complete giving. In Philippians chapter 2, verses 5 to 11, we read about this kenosis, the self-emptying of Jesus. And in these verses, what is known as the Christological hymn in this letter of Paul, we are told that the Lord did not count equality with God as something to be grasped, but emptied himself, taking the form of a slave. And becoming a slave, he became even humbler to accepting death on a cross. So therefore, when Jesus speaks these verses about giving his flesh and blood for the life of the world, he is speaking of that day when people will not recognize that he is God's Son. When people will not recognize that he has come for the salvation of the world, when people will misunderstand him, will ridicule him, will condemn him, and will crucify him. That is when he spreads his arms out in total surrender to God's will. That is when he will invite people to come to him and will draw people to himself, that he will be God's Son and will have drawn them to himself. So the life of Jesus, the flesh and blood that he speaks about in the gospel text of today, is a reference to his death on a cross. The death through which he will save every single person who wants to be saved. He invites us today to make a reflection on his own self-giving. A self-giving through his life, which culminated in his giving himself totally on the cross, and invites us to imitate him in that way. Will I imitate Jesus in my own self-giving today?